Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Happy Friday, everybody. Before we move into the main stories, we note that the Politburo met yesterday to discuss the draft government work report. The readout for the meeting was short, and the language on the economy was very similar to what we've already seen at the December Central Economic Work Conference. We note the development and move on. First up for today, yesterday, Thursday, the White House in the US announced an investigation by the Department of Commerce into the potential national security risks posed by smart, connected cars. Regular viewers will remember that we discussed this very possibility on China Update months ago when we followed China labeling Tesla as a national security threat and banning them from certain spaces. Indeed, as we anticipated on the channel back then, yesterday, US President Biden expressed with the announcement, quote, "China imposes restrictions on American autos and other foreign autos operating in China. Why should connected vehicles from China be allowed to operate in our country without safeguards?" End quote. In a longer statement, the Commerce Department explained that the US will investigate potential data and cybersecurity risks posed by Chinese electric vehicles and other internet-connected cars. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo told reporters the same day that the administration is reviewing the risks, quote, "before Chinese manufactured vehicles become widespread in the United States and potentially threaten our privacy and our national security." End quote. US outlet Bloomberg reports, citing an unnamed source, that the US isn't yet calling for a ban of Chinese EVs, but could impose some limitations on imports of the vehicles or parts. Potential curbs could also affect a range of connected and autonomous vehicles, as well as related components from China and other foreign adversaries, the source added. On China Update, we have also anticipated stronger restrictions on Chinese vehicles generally from the US and others. Biden's comments indicated that this may be coming too. Quote, "China is determined to dominate the future of the auto market, including by using unfair practices. China's policies could flood our market with its vehicles, posing risks to our national security." End quote. Meanwhile, the machinations of the global EV race marches on. The US and EU players continue to lean into China's massive auto market, and this will have a direct impact on their lobbying efforts back in their own countries. Volkswagen, for example, has announced that it will team up with Chinese EV maker XPeng to develop intelligent connected vehicles in China. Its largest development center outside of Germany, Volkswagen China Technology Company, in East China's Anhui province, will host the research. US automaker General Motors is investing $300 million in a joint venture with Beijing-based autonomous driving company Momenta for the development of next-generation self-driving technologies for future GM vehicles in China. When the announcement was first made, the executive vice president of General Motors and president of GM China expressed, quote, "Customers in China are embracing electrification and advanced self-driving technology faster than anywhere else in the world, and the agreement between GM and Momenta will accelerate our deployment of next-generation solutions tailor-made for our consumers in China." End quote. Meanwhile, in a very timely report, the excellent US-based Rhodium Group published a note this week called "Chinese EV Investments Boom Amid Growing Political Backlash." The piece argues that Chinese outbound foreign direct investment along the electric vehicle value chain has been booming in recent years, fueling anxiety about Chinese companies' dominance in high-tech industries expanding to overseas markets. The note reviews China's global EV-related investments in 2023 and discusses the outlook for 2024, making the following observations, which we now quote directly. 1. Chinese outbound foreign direct investment in EV-related industries is likely to set a new record in 2023. At $28.2 billion, it does not match the $29.7 billion of 2022, but the 2023 figure is a conservative estimate that does not include several big-ticket projects with no known price tag, such as BYD's plant in Hungary. 2. Chinese EV outbound foreign direct investment shifted away from North America toward Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. 3. The localized battery manufacturing is driving investment. Chinese battery investments, driven by greenfield projects, are increasingly diversifying. Chinese battery manufacturers are bringing more of the supply chain with them in their overseas expansion, likely in response to growing market demand and reshoring pressures. 4. For 2024, we expect Chinese EV investment abroad to remain strong, but the shift from battery investment to EV manufacturing in Europe, Latin America, and Asia. Investment in North America will remain volatile due to regulatory uncertainty, but Mexico could see an influx of Chinese projects. 5. Chinese EV and battery companies are increasingly stuck between a rock and a hard place. Chinese investors are increasingly facing political backlash in host economies, most notably the United States, which is trying to limit Chinese influence over its EV supply chains. At the same time, Beijing's support of the internationalization of the EV and battery companies could eventually hit a limit. Chinese policymakers are increasingly growing concerned over reverse technology transfers and value-added clean tech production shifting abroad at a time when China urgently needs to build up new drivers for economic growth at home. Here ends the direct quote. Some commentators argue too that Chinese companies will use Mexico as a back door into the US market. This week it was reported, for example, that China's largest EV maker, BYD, is looking to set up a manufacturing facility in Mexico to avoid US tariffs on Chinese vehicles. However, quote, if the US government determines that there are national security risks from PRC-connected vehicles, then the Mexico backdoor for BYD won't work. And if the US does move forward on something related to national security and connected vehicles, the concerns should not just be about hardware components, but also software, and especially the advanced driver assistance system software, as so much of that development for global automakers is done in the PRC. US firms like Tesla and GM have a lot to lose if the US moves forward and the PRC retaliates, and if the US blocks any of their software developed with input from staff in the PRC from being used on vehicles in the US. The lobbying over this rule-making study is going to be intense. End quote. Next up, Australia and China and more spying revelations. But just quickly, if you enjoyed today's episode of China Update, I have a huge favor to ask. That is just to like and subscribe. It's just 2 clicks of the mouse, but it's a huge help for me and the channel. It's the only way in which it can grow with the algorithm on YouTube. Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are also in the description below for those who want to help keep the channel financially sustainable. I rely primarily on your support to keep going in this regard. Thank you so much, everybody, as always, for the ongoing support. Next up, in an exclusive yesterday, Hong Kong-based South China Morning Post reported that Australia has invited Wang Yi, China's foreign minister and top diplomat, for a 2-day visit in the second half of March. He is expected to discuss a range of thorny issues, the outlet writes, on the table after bilateral relations warmed last year. An unnamed source reportedly told the outlet, quote, Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong issued a formal invitation to Wang. The invitation was the formal conclusion of discussions between the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and the Chinese Embassy over a couple of weeks. End quote. The visit would be the first by a Chinese foreign minister to Australia since 2017, when Malcolm Turnbull was the Prime Minister. Australian-based outlet The Australian writes today that Wang Yi is expected to visit Australia, quote, in a trip apparently timed to coincide with an end to Beijing's crippling tariffs on Australian wine, end quote. The Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade has yet to confirm the trip officially, but New Zealand's Foreign Minister Winston Peters told media this week that Wang Yi would be travelling to Wellington, quote, in the near future, end quote, suggesting an Australia plus New Zealand trip. Meanwhile, as we discussed in yesterday's video, PRC spying and espionage and influence activities are of increasing concern in Australia. Yesterday, outlet The Australian also reported that a long-serving member of the Victorian Liberal Party has been jailed for a foreign interference offence, quote, aimed at the heart of the Australian government, end quote, in the words of the judge, who added, quote, I am unable to find any evidence of contrition or remorse. Your offending amounts to a serious example of the offence. End quote. Dee's son, Sunny Duong, 68 years old, on Thursday was sentenced to a 2-year and 9-month term of imprisonment. We note that in the PRC, this crime would likely result in execution. The outlet The Australian explains that Duong is the first person to be convicted under Australia's foreign interference laws. He was found guilty after a jury trial last year of a single charge of intentionally engaging in conduct with the intention of preparing for or planning foreign interference. The case, the outlet explains, centres around a $37,000 Australian donation made by Duong to the Royal Melbourne Hospital in June of 2020 that was attended by then Federal Minister Alan Tudge. Quote, "But Duong's hidden motive was an effort to cultivate Mr. Tudge for a further approach on behalf of the party. The evidence at trial proved Mr. Tudge was selected because Duong believed he could be a future Prime Minister and could be persuaded to influence government policy." End quote. The judge in the case observed, quote, "It is a sophisticated, far-reaching and evasive influence system." End quote. In yesterday's video, we discussed Director General of Security for the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, ASIO, Mike Burgess, said in an annual speech on Wednesday evening his agency had confronted a spy ring and that a former politician had sold out their country. On Thursday, these remarks unleashed speculation in the media, in Parliament, and in the public, as well as demands for the former politician to be identified. Australian outlet ABC News called the parliamentary debate, quote, "a giant game of Cluedo," end quote. Conservative opposition leader Peter Dutton, speaking to a Sydney radio station, expressed, quote, "The trouble is, if he does not indicate the name, then there is a cloud hanging over everybody else. If you are putting that detail out there, as he has done, I think it is incumbent to either give us a little bit more criteria or a little bit more of a hint as to who the person might be," end quote. We note once more that in the PRC, this too would likely result in execution, or at best a lifetime under house arrest. It was also reported on Thursday by online outlet news.com.au that former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull's son Alex Turnbull, quote, revealed he was the target of suspected Chinese agents over an infrastructure project, end quote. The younger Turnbull told the outlet that he was contacted around 2017 when his father was Prime Minister, and he was offered equity in a company. He expressed to the outlet, quote, "It was just so brazen. My reaction was to express no interest and forward the details immediately to the authorities," end quote. Thus, there is increasing concern and focus on these operations in Australia, and we will likely see similar revelations made in other Five Eyes or Anglophone nations as we move forward. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much everybody for watching. Have a good Friday, and I will see you all tomorrow.